Hello everyone, I'm Virginia. Welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, then welcome back. Thank you guys so much for watching. So today I'm going to be comparing two different shows, one which came out on Amazon Prime and one which came out on Netflix not too long ago. And those two shows are Making the Cut and Next in Fashion. Since they came out so close together, I thought it would be super fun to compare them to each other, so let's get started. Okay, so if you don't know, Making the Cut and Next in Fashion are both design competitions, which basically means a certain number of designers come in and then they compete in order to win a certain prize. Now, Next in Fashion has a considerably smaller but definitely more common prize, and then Making the Cut has an extremely large prize, one which I think that I rarely see in competition shows. So both of the shows do happen to have 10 episodes, but I'm not sure if they do have the same number of competitors, and that is something that will definitely come up later. But Making the Cut did premiere on Amazon Prime, and Next in Fashion came out on Netflix. So Netflix generally releases its things, if it's going to release them not all at once, then it might release them an episode at a time. I do think that they release most of Next in Fashion all at once. I do know for a fact that Making the Cut was released 1 week at a time because of the way that it's set up. So I'm basically going to be judging both of the shows on 5 different criteria. I'm going to judge the overall organization of the show, how it was laid out, and if it made sense. I'm also going to be judging the personality of the show. Both shows have 2 co-hosts, and then they also have a panel of judges as well as the contestants. So I'm going to be judging mostly the personality of the contestants and the personalities of the 2 co-hosts. Next, I'm also going to be judging creativity. Obviously, this is a type of show that has been out before. Project Runway was a show that was on for so many years, so it has definitely set a precedent for what we are going to expect from one of these design competition shows. And then also I'm going to be judging the entertainment value of the show, if it actually kept me interested. This is obviously very biased, but I'm going to be judging whether I personally was interested in it and wanted to see another episode. Also, I'm going to be judging it on whether it was easy to watch. Some of these shows can be a bit confusing or a bit convoluted, so I just wanted to judge the overall bingeableness of these 2 shows and whether you could easily watch through them very quickly. Okay, so first I'll give you an overview of Making the Cut. Now, I did watch Next in Fashion first, but because I watched Making the Cut more recently, I'm just going to give you an overview of that very quickly. It does have 2 co-hosts. One is Heidi Klum and the other is Tim Gunn. If you have seen Project Runway, then you will know that obviously that was their show, so now this is kind of their new show. Also, I wanted to mention that these shows, both Next in Fashion and Making the Cut, have professional designers instead of amateur designers who really don't know what they're doing and just kind of decided, oh, I want to be a designer. All of these designers who are in the shows either have their own line or have worked in an extremely professional line before. Making the Cut is actually not just an Amazon Prime show, it is also something that they are using to sell products on Amazon Prime. So that is something that I find kind of unique about that show, the fact that each week they will pick a designer and they will pick one of their pieces to sell on Amazon Prime. Another part about Making the Cut is that it does change locations quite often. It starts out in, I think, New York, and then it immediately moves to Paris, so don't get attached to New York because that's not where they're going to be. And then it will eventually move to another location, so it isn't as stationary as Next in Fashion. Also, Making the Cut does rotate out their judges, as does Next in Fashion. As for Next in Fashion goes, like I said, it was released on Netflix and it is hosted by Alexa Chung, who I personally really like to watch on YouTube just because she's so entertaining, as well as Tan France. So Next in Fashion, unlike Making the Cut, does not sell the items online. However, they do also switch out their judges. Okay, so now I'll get down into my categories. The first category which I have up is organization. So these shows are completely different in terms of organization, and it is quite interesting to see the difference in how they get things done. For example, Next in Fashion starts out with all of the designers paired. So they have an even number of designers and every designer has a partner. Now, what this means is that when one pair loses, or is about to get eliminated, that means both of them are eliminated. So this means that no matter what they and their partner came up with, both of them will be eliminated no matter who sewed it or who designed it. Now, in making the cut, they actually really individualize every designer and make sure that they are kind of pushing their own brand. Basically, they really want to see from every single designer what their brand speaks to, what type of textures, fabrics, colors they use, what statement they're trying to make, all of those sorts of things. Now, later in making the cut, they do pair up the designers, but I'm pretty sure they only pair them up for one episode, and I'm pretty sure that both of the people in the group didn't actually get sent home. They only sent home one of them. Now, another part of the organization was the fact that Next in Fashion pretty much stayed in one place, and Making the Cut moved around a lot. So Next in Fashion, they start out, they're in their little workroom. They actually have their fabric in-house. They don't have to go look for it. And in Making the Cut, they start out, they're in New York, they immediately fly them to Paris, make them go to the shop to find their fabric and then return. And then after a while, they also move the main location yet again. Something else that Making the Cut does is that they also bring in photo shoots sometimes or go location scouting. Now, something that I wasn't particularly fond of in the beginning of Next in Fashion was the fact that they were paired. However, they don't keep them paired through the whole show, so at some point the teams do get split up. The last thing that I want to talk to you guys about in terms of organization is the eliminations. So in Next in Fashion, they basically tell you we're going to eliminate one pair per week, and then once they get to the individual rounds, they will eliminate one person per week. It's all very straightforward, and like with most competition shows, I think the last couple of weeks they decide that they will eliminate two. It's really not that far into left field. However, on Making the Cut, they basically say at the very beginning that they could eliminate as many people as they want each week, which was kind of odd because it made me wonder right from the beginning, okay, if you're going to eliminate 2 or 3 people per week and you don't have that many competitors in the first place, how many episodes exactly is this show going to be? Or is it just going to last a couple of weeks and then you'll have eliminated everybody? One thing that I did actually find interesting about Making the Cut is that the competitors are actually allowed to argue their position once they are up for elimination. So if they are in the bottom 2 or 3 or whatever, they are allowed to say, I actually deserve to be here because of X, Y, and Z. Overall though, in terms of organization, if I had to decide which show was more organized, obviously I would have to go with Next in Fashion. It does stay in one place for longer, and even though it is interesting to see Making the Cut go a bunch of different places, the fact that they are going different places, eliminating different numbers of people, and things are just overall less organized, I would have to say Next in Fashion is the winner of the organization round. Okay, so next I'm going to move on to entertainment in terms of, is it entertaining to watch? So in terms of entertainment, I would say that both of these shows had very different trajectories. Next in Fashion at the very beginning was quite entertaining and very fast-paced just because of the number of garments that they wanted the people to make. They were also paired up, so that caused quite a bit of contention between the two people who were working together, especially depending on whether they knew each other or did not before the show, which was something else that I found interesting. The fact that they allowed some people who knew each other to work together in pairs, and then other people just got paired up randomly and didn't really have any option as to who their partner was. This led to Next in Fashion being a little bit more contentious in the beginning and just kind of drawing you in more. However, on Making the Cut, I would say that maybe it wasn't as entertaining in the beginning, especially for me, up until they got to the elimination portion when I realized that it wasn't just a regular elimination and they could be eliminating as many people as they wanted. Overall, in terms of how the competition went, I would say that people weren't really that stressed out through the whole beginning episode of Making the Cut. Also, something that made the elimination round interesting was the fact that they did not speak to everyone about their garments. Usually during a competition show, they pull everyone up and they tell them the pros and cons of whatever they made or their dislikes and likes. However, in Making the Cut, they only pulled certain people. Now, some of the people they pulled up and said, wow, you did a great job, and surprised the people, and other people they pulled up and said, wow, you didn't do a great job, explain to us why we should keep you. Basically, through the whole thing, I wasn't really being that entertained up until the elimination. In terms of the overall arc of the show, I would say that Making the Cut was less entertaining in the beginning, and then it kind of ramps up toward the end. On the flip side, Next in Fashion starts out very, very stressful at the beginning. People are running around, even though they get to pick out their fabrics from just the closet, which is right next to them. So actually I felt like maybe that shouldn't have been as stressful, since their closet is next to them and they can go get more fabric whenever they want. Whereas on Making the Cut, they actually had to go back to the store, spend money, and buy new fabric. But overall for Next in Fashion, it definitely started out on a very high note and kept me going through quite a few episodes before it started to slow down. One thing that I do have to say for both shows is that you don't really know who's going to win based on what you're seeing in the beginning and the middle, and that is something I definitely like. So, in terms of entertainment, rating these two between each other, I actually have to say it is a tie, because Making the Cut is kind of dragging in the beginning and then ramps up toward the end, and Next in Fashion kind of pushes you very much in the beginning and then will lag toward the middle. Now, I was extremely entertained actually by the last couple of episodes of Next in Fashion, where I felt like it did kind of ramp up again, but I would say overall both of them were pretty equal in terms of entertainment. Okay, so next I'm going to move on to creativity. In terms of creativity, I'm not going to particularly judge the creativity of the people who are making their designs, because fashion is pretty subjective. However, I'm pretty much going to be talking about the creativity of the show. A very quick note, I should mention that in Making the Cut, a lot of the designs looked very similar at the beginning, which obviously isn't something that's as necessarily entertaining. One thing I think that in part caused this was that so many of the designers felt like black was a significant part of their brand, and they just kept designing things in black and kind of in the same shapes. I saw so many black dresses in the first episode, I honestly could not tell them apart by the end. Now, there were designers in Next in Fashion that also loved black as like statement pieces. However, they also were designers who really loved to throw in a punch of color here or there. So it kept it from getting too boring, and then maybe some of the other designers would pick up black and they might drop it or use some sort of other pattern. I think also the fact that Next in Fashion made everyone work in pairs, it pushed everyone's creativity a little bit more. Whereas in Making the Cut, since each individual designer already had their idea of what their aesthetic was, they kind of would start repeating the same thing. However, partway through the show, they do force all of the designers to work in pairs, and there are some very unique things that come out of that. So in terms of creativity for the overall show, I would say that Next in Fashion is not that creative. Obviously, they do have a setup that is more traditional. They start out in a workroom. They have a fashion show at the end of the second night, I think it is, for most of the episodes. And then they do their judging. They judge all of the people, and then they eliminate one of them, or a singular pair. So it was a very regular, tried and true kind of setup. The one thing that was actually creative about their show were kind of these little interludes where Alexa Chung and Tan France give these little kind of like an advice section on how to wear whatever the outfit or design of the week was. So for example, when they were doing denims, they said, oh, this is how you can wear denim. This is how you can maybe wear denim in a new way that's not just jeans or a jean jacket. And they kind of give some little design ideas, and they do that for every episode. So these were something that I actually really personally liked. Not to say that Making the Cut didn't have these little interludes. They did have some sort of interlude, however, they just didn't have anything to do with fashion design. So as for Making the Cut, obviously Making the Cut was very creative in how they set up their whole show. They moved around, they switched so many different places, they threw photo shoots at the designers. Basically, they were saying, oh, you need to do all of the things that a designer will have to do in real life. You can't just treat this as a design competition show. You're also going to have to treat it as something that you will do with your entire career. Another thing that they did, which I noticed Next in Fashion did not, was not making the designers have to sew every single piece of their outfit. So at night, there was a seamstress who could take the designs from each designer and kind of go off of a tech pack, is what they call it. And they give the seamstress basically instructions on how to complete the garment or a portion of the garment that they want fixed, which I think took some of the pressure off of the designers in terms of having to finish or having to sew something all by themselves. So another bit on overall creativity of the show was the fact that Making the Cut was going to sell one of the garments from one of the designers after each episode. And this is something that I would like to see in more competition shows, instead of it just being kind of a, oh, if you didn't win the competition, then maybe you don't get anything out of it. I really like the fact that they kind of took the chance to sell an item. Now, however, I do understand that this is obviously a sales tactic for Amazon. They are obviously advertising their own clothing store, but it was something that was interesting and kind of creative in terms of the show. So between the two shows, I would have to give the award for creativity to Making the Cut, simply because they put in more time and got a little bit more creative with how they were going to set up the show. They sold things from each designer, which I thought was really cool. And they did go some more places, which wasn't always necessary in my opinion, but at least they thought to do it. Now, something that I did find interesting was that some of the places they went seemed quite underwhelming, especially when you start episode 1 in front of the Eiffel Tower. So my next category is personality. In terms of the personality of the show, I'm mostly going to be talking about the hosts and the competitors. Now, obviously there was some personality with the judges, but because they are trying to be somewhat a little bit more objective, I'm not going to put a whole lot into their personality. Obviously, Naomi Campbell has a big personality and she's super funny, so she was one of the judges on Making the Cut, but I wouldn't say that necessarily the judges on Next in Fashion lacked a whole lot of personality. So in terms of the competitors, I would say that the competitors on Next in Fashion showed more personality, or at least the way it was filmed, it seemed like they had more personality, where I would say on Making the Cut they were a little bit more serious and maybe covered a little bit less of their personal lives, or the bits of their personal lives that they chose to show were just not that interesting to me. So I would say that I liked the competitors' personalities more on Next in Fashion than Making the Cut. Something else that I noticed also about personality on Next in Fashion was that they really delved into how the designers became designers and why they became designers, and they pretty much covered the majority of the contestants in this way, which I found to be extremely useful, just kind of hearing their origin stories. On Making the Cut, while they did kind of cover their origin stories, they also kind of went on little tangents which maybe didn't have quite as much to do with why they became designers, or they would pick out a little piece of why a person became a designer, but they didn't do it for that many of the competitors. Also, something that's always interested me with reality television in general is the fact that they have to decide who they're going to cover maybe before they've picked the winner. So sometimes you'll get a lot of coverage on someone who's about to be eliminated, and maybe you got less coverage on someone who lasts a little bit longer. For example, spoiler alert, it covered certain people who I will not mention, but I'm sure if you've seen the show, you know who I'm talking about. They covered more on a certain person who does not last as long. So yes, that's all I will say on that. But overall, I felt like they were much more even in the way they covered the people on Next in Fashion. Something else that was also interesting in terms of the tone and vibe of the shows was the fact that the people on Making the Cut just didn't seem that interested. They didn't maybe look that driven. And I'm not saying this subjectively, I'm saying this pretty objectively, because later in the show, they actually tell the contestants, hey, you guys actually need to care more. And they give them a challenge that they have to complete within, I think, less than 24 hours. And obviously this type of thing was not done on Next in Fashion, because basically the episode 1, they were pretty much running around and fighting for that prize. Also, in terms of hosts, what I would say, I do really love Heidi Klum and I really love watching Tim Gunn. However, some of their little interludes were a little bit awkward or a little bit kind of like on a tangent, and I just kind of didn't understand the point of them. Also, I think they were really busy trying to advertise the places that they went. As for Next in Fashion, I think that they did a really good job as hosts, and I really love the fact that all of their interludes related directly to the show. So if I had to judge the overall personality of both shows, I must say that Next in Fashion is the winner. Between the two shows, you definitely saw a more consistent and pumped up personality in Next in Fashion than what I saw in Making the Cut. So my next category is, was it easy to watch? Between the two shows, I would say they're both fairly easy to watch. However, I would say that I definitely watched through Next in Fashion much faster than I watched through Making the Cut. Now, this was in part because Making the Cut only came out 1 week at a time, and I had to wait another week for the next episode to come out, which is something that one could expect. It's kind of like it being on television, which makes sense. However, it was something about Next in Fashion that made me really want to watch the next episode, where Making the Cut didn't necessarily do that. I don't know, maybe it was because Alexa Chung and Tan France were at the end going, click the button that says next. I'm not really sure. I think that they really understood the fact that they were on an internet platform and the fact that binge watching is something that people really love to do, where Making the Cut was set up more for traditional type of television, and because they have it released on a week-to-week basis, it's something you might lose interest in throughout the week. Also, something to mention is not necessarily to do with is it easy to watch, but does the format actually do what it says it's going to do? Next in Fashion really just says, hey, this is a show and it's entertaining to watch, whereas Making the Cut says, hey, this is a show and it's entertaining to watch, but you can also buy the clothes. So I did go online and I did check to see if I could buy any of these outfits, and I must say they were always sold out. So if you were looking to buy something, I'm not saying that you couldn't buy it, but it just really doesn't make sense to release something, say that people can buy it, and then sell out of it immediately. Now, they did say that the item was limited, but saying that it's limited really makes me question how many of these things they actually ordered in the first place for it to be sold out in minutes. I just think in future seasons, this is something that they really should work out. It's not that they need to sell millions and millions of each outfit, but I do think that they should make it slightly more accessible so that maybe sometime within the week, if you don't catch the show that very day, you can at least buy it later in the week. Also, a question that came to my mind based on the reviews, some of the clothes weren't particularly amazing, which means that they're not making them with the highest quality goods, and if they're not making them with the highest quality goods, then why can't you make a whole bunch of them? Also, in terms of the shows being easy to watch, I must say that the way that Making the Cut is set up, while it is a little bit difficult to adjust to at first, it is definitely something that you get used to as time goes on. You get used to being surprised by how many people they will or will not eliminate, how many people they will and will not judge in terms of like whether they liked their outfit or not, and also in terms of where they're going or what they're necessarily going to be doing for that episode. Once you get into the show, you pretty much are up for anything. So something that goes into being easy to watch, in my opinion, is whether or not the things that you're watching are actually interesting. Obviously, the less interesting things are, the more difficult it will be for someone to watch through it quickly, and the more creative things that you're seeing, the easier it will be for you to watch through it. I must say that I saw more creativity in the designers in Next in Fashion than I did in the designers in Making the Cut. And even though both shows had professional designers, many with their own lines, I think that the designers in Next in Fashion definitely grew more in terms of their vision than most of the designers in Making the Cut. So I don't want to give a spoiler, but there were designers in both shows which were inspired by sort of Asian influences. I don't want to specifically speak to who. And I noticed that in one show, people were expecting one of them to win, and in another show, people were less expecting that person to win. And people seemed really surprised by who won and who got eliminated in each show, but I was definitely not surprised, because I would say that in one of the shows I saw a lot more creativity in one of those designers than I did the other, and I felt like one of them was doing quite a bit more repetitive fashion, which is something that I would have to say I noticed among all the designers in both shows, the fact that in Next in Fashion they were growing more and being more creative, and I saw more repetitive designs in Making the Cut. So overall, between the two shows, if I had to pick a winner for whose show was easier to watch, I must say that it was Next in Fashion. It was just something that was a little bit faster to watch through and easier to watch through. Now that all of Making the Cut is up on Amazon and you don't have to wait for each episode to come out, it might be a little bit easier to binge through. However, I think that just the format gets a little confusing in the very beginning, and that might slow you down a little bit. But in terms of picking a winner for all 5 categories and who was the overall winner between the two shows, I would say the winner is... Yes, that's right. I would say that Next in Fashion was the winner for me in terms of all 5 categories. Now, I think it is something that could be changed in the future, but just in terms of judging season 1 of Making the Cut and season 1 of Next in Fashion, I definitely would pick Next in Fashion as the winner. I do hope to see Making the Cut make some changes and then maybe pick some designers that we can see grow a little bit more, where Next in Fashion picked quite a few designers who grew a ton from the beginning to the end, and Making the Cut maybe not as much. But I do think, just based on the format of how Making the Cut is, where they're going different places and expecting different things of their designers, that in the future it could actually be a more entertaining show than Next in Fashion. Now, I do have another video coming out next Saturday, so if you guys are interested, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified about my next video. I do make clothing videos for Saturdays, so that is something that you guys can check out. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.